Nathan.
Yeah, thank you. Great to meet you all today, and thanks, Jonathan, for inviting me along. Helpful here to set out a bit of background about myself. So I work with Lawrence as an advisor to teamSOS, but my background specifically, as Jonathan mentioned, in the Martyn's Law space. Since 2021, been an advisor to Figen Murray, as you can see in both those images there, who is the mother of Martyn Het and the initiator and driver behind this piece of legislation, which, as I say, Martyn's Law, the informally known as that, because of Figen's son Martyn died in the Manchester Arena attack. Beyond that, my background in the kind of counterterrorism security space includes experience working with the UK Home Office and counter-extremism, counter-terrorism policing around a range of terror attacks and responses there, and my initial involvement with the Manchester Arena attack, which I'll come on to when I worked for Lucy Powell, now deputy leader of the Labour Party, but back then I worked for her as shadow education and her role as constituency MP. Top there, you see founder of SW1. So I run a consultancy on communication, so public affairs and media. Lawrence, next slide, please. So I mentioned Figen Murray. I think many of you will be familiar with Figen, and also hopefully you're familiar with what Martyn's Law is. Recent research showed that there's still a lack of understanding and awareness what's required around Martyn's Law. But I thought it'd be helpful, first off, to set out a bit of context around why we're here and what it is. So I think everyone here will recall the tragedy of the terrorist attack at the Manchester Arena on the 22nd of May. We're coming up to the 9-year anniversary of that this weekend. At 31 minutes past 10, a terrorist, Salman Abedi, detonated his homemade IED device in the foyer, and it killed 22 people. This picture here is the most common picture associated with Manchester, and really highlights the range of victims of terrorism. If you look at the third in from the left in the middle row, Safi Rose, the youngest, was 8 years old. Go across to, that is Martyn, the namesake of this legislation. But the key point about this, the tragedy of that night, and the Manchester Arena inquiry, all 3 volumes, found basically a plethora of failures, and the recommendations from that suggested a range of improvements across the board, from the security services to school providers, venue owners, event providers, and Martyn's Law was one of those. If you could skip to the next slide, please, Lawrence. So again, context setting, just to show how credible this legislation is and the rigor of it. Unlike a lot of pieces of legislation, this actually went cross-party scrutiny. So started under the Conservative government with Boris Johnson, and as you see here, I could have included so many more moments here, but these are the key factors that I thought were worth highlighting. And from that first slide, you saw my introduction where there was the walk at the bottom. That was the key moment where we really drove the awareness, from when I organised for Figen to walk from where Martyn died at the Manchester Arena to 10 Downing Street back in 2024. And I've stopped this graphic at when royal assent was achieved a year ago on the 3rd of April. There has been a lot more that's happened since then, which will be relevant for this call. Notably, the guidance has been published very recently. So there are some now practical steps that we can take, which I'll come on to be prepared for enforcement of the legislation. But this slide here, I hope you can read. What this does is it sets out, this had Boris Johnson, Liz Truss's government, despite short, Rishi Sunak's government, and this current government, and the whole scrutiny around that legislation. So you know, there was a point where this legislation went to the Home Affairs Select Committee, and they said that it needed to be revised and strengthened. It was, which is why you had the capacity threshold was increased from 100 to 200. Next slide, please, Lawrence. Again, context setting, I probably don't need to share the current threat level, as you'll all see from recent terror attacks. We've seen an increase in frequency of targeted attacks, state-involved terrorism. But in general, since March 2017, there have been 17 successful domestic terror attacks in the UK. And MI5 are constantly working on, have stopped 19 late-stage attacks. The worrying thing here for me always is the number of people being investigated annually, and how many are skirting on the fringes of terrorism extremism, and that ranges from far right to extreme Islamist extremism. And as I always say, it's not a case of what if. Unfortunately, we know it's a matter of when the next attack is going to happen in the UK. Next slide, please, Lawrence. For schools in particular, this is helpful to set out. So all the stats show that there's an increasing number year on year of young people being influenced by extremism. And that's for a whole range of reasons, which I don't need to go into here, but and you'll be aware is the factor of social media and algorithms and the amount of content they're seeing now, which is of an extremist nature or serious violence. And we're seeing increasing rates of young people referred to the Prevent programme. And we're also seeing, as becomes evident when we see attack cases in the UK. So you look at Axel Ruda-Cabana, you know, he was engaged with Prevent. So the frequency of people being referred is key to note here. And the role schools have, I know that you receive your Prevent training and you engage with the programme through stakeholders. But again, this really shows, so whilst we haven't seen a terror attack in schools, and hopefully we don't ever see a terror attack in schools, you know, if we look at situations across the Atlantic in the US, we see attacks in schools happening. We see them across the world. It's likely that this could become a target at some point. So it's really, really important that schools, colleges, and education facilities are equipped with the preparedness and response plans to a terror attack, which is where I come on to. Next slide, please, Lawrence. Oh, sorry, I don't actually. I'm going to use this as very quickly. I mentioned recent terror attacks. So we've had an even more recent terror attack, as we saw in Golders Green, than this, which was a low sophisticated knife attack, which is the tactic that is being adopted now. Extremists and terrorists are being encouraged to just go out and do damage what they can, whether that's using a vehicle as a weapon or using knives as a weapon. Why I highlight the Heaton Park synagogue as an example, despite 2 deaths, tragedies, this is an excellent case of where evacuation, lockdown, essentially Martyn's Law, worked perfectly to prevent the further loss of lives. And that was a call made by the rabbi on site that day. Obviously, the Jewish community has been under threat and heightened threat at the moment. But Martyn's Law is not exactly something new to the Jewish community or Jewish education settings, due to the threats they've had for years and years and years. And in this case here, it's just a great example of when you have those basic procedures and basic protocols of the evacuation, communication, and lockdown, how lives can be saved. So it's really, really important, and it's a great, whilst a tragic example, a great example of what you can do to protect people and minimize the impact of an attack. Next slide, please, Lawrence. So for schools and colleges, sixth forms, education settings, due to the special considerations around these, the government have allocated the threshold for all education settings as standard tier. So that is usually meeting the threshold between 200 and 799 persons, even if your site, your premises holds more than that and would otherwise qualify for enhanced duty 800 plus. Because of the special measures and the security arrangements for schools and the complexity of that, you still only meet the standard duty requirements. And what that means for education settings is much less complicated or sophisticated response plans and protection plans. As Lord Hanson says here in the quote, I always think it's useful, again, just reiterating that point, this for the first time now, I know that schools have sophisticated security measures, but for the first time, you will now have to think about the terrorist threat and how you might respond to that. And sets out here, highlighted it in red. Happy, by the way, for these slides to be shared afterwards for people. I'll run through now the simple steps that you will need to take, which essentially notifying the SIA, the Security Industry Authority, who is the chosen regulator by the government, a responsible person. So I'll come on to just what that is and who that is. As I say, considering the threat, and then those 4 key points about thinking. So your protection procedures of a lockdown, evacuation, communications, all which, as I work with teamSOS and Lawrence, teamSOS has been designed to meet those requirements and help you and wider education settings meet those. Next slide, please, Lawrence. So, as I say, because of the standard tier threshold for education settings, what is required is significantly less. So when you go to, say, an enhanced tier venue, so an arena, you might see bag scanners, much more sophisticated procedures. For schools, that is not required. That would be overly burdensome. Martyn's Law is designed to be proportionate and practicable. So the proportionate is the key thing to remember here. So when you're speaking to external stakeholders, it's always got to be proportionate. So you don't need specialist training. What needs to happen is a basic awareness amongst all your staff and the people that use the facilities and the venue. And that can come from utilizing free government resources. So the government has provided free ACT e-learning training. So I would really encourage everyone to do that. It takes up to less than an hour, basically. And then in line with, I know that your schools and education settings already do security procedures. So just utilizing the requirements under Martyn's Law, so those 4 key things said, the protection procedures, including those in your practice drills. So regularly reviewing those, identifying the weak points, familiarity of what happens and where to go, what to do in these situations of potential attack. We'll drill that routine into staff in a way that, as we do, like with first aid training, people know how to respond immediately, and we can reduce the impact of an attack. Next slide, please, Lawrence. The responsible person. So before the guidance came out, this was a key one, that issue that people were raising and concerns. For education settings, it is the governing body or the academy trust. So it won't be any one individual person, it's collective. However, the governing body and the academy trust has a responsibility then to pass the operational duties to someone within that specific site. So it might be the head teacher, it might be someone who's responsible for the health and safety of the site. As I say, Martyn's Law will sit alongside health and safety regulations, separate piece, but so it might make sense depending on the makeup of those that venue. If that person already has the responsibility for security and safety, making sure this applies. But the responsible person, so that governing body, the Academy Trust, will need to proactively engage with the regulator. So the regulator doesn't have the capacity to come around and review every single school, college, or business beyond that. So it's the responsibility is on the qualifying premise to notify the SIA that it, one, meets the threshold, and two, its plans and what it is doing to comply with the legislation. Next slide, please, Lawrence. So what you'll need to do is set out those four key headings. There's obviously individual, much more complex things that you do within those, but evacuation. So thinking about your evacuation plans, you'll probably already have these in terms of your fire safety and health and safety plans or serious incidents. Your evacuation, again, I imagine many will have these for when you have incidents like truants or threats happening outside the facilities. Lockdown, key one, and communication, as I say. Lawrence will come on to a demonstration which really shows how teamSOS communicates in an instance and helps you lock down, evacuate, or evacuate. But yeah, essentially you need a fast, reliable method. So in the Manchester Arena attack, and we've seen in other attacks, communication was slow, it wasn't clear, and that is absolutely key to ensuring that impact and lives are saved. Next slide, please, Lawrence. And as I say, so the government set out when the legislation was passed in April last year, a 24-month minimum 24-month implementation period. The guidance was published last month. So we're looking, hopefully, from a campaign side, myself and Figen, pushing the government to enforce the legislation ahead of the 10th anniversary of the Manchester Arena, so next year, so 2027. And that is what the Home Office and the SIA are working towards. They haven't confirmed the exact date yet, but that is what you should be working towards. So now what you can do with the guidance, which is online, accessible, the government have a range of resources for free, as I say, fact sheets, is to start thinking about your security-minded culture and embedding that across your staff and your schools, colleges, if you're working with multiple, and considering how you can make every staff member aware of what to do in the event of an attack, and reviewing your existing procedures. So looking at simple risk assessments, do certain locks work? Is it safe? As I say, is the evacuation point secure? A key point which often gets overlooked, and schools inadvertently do this, is thinking about your external presence. So images used on your website or information on your website. Are you inadvertently giving out information that would be useful for someone who might be planning to attack your site? So think about that. So for instance, busiest periods of time, or when the schools open for extracurricular things like events, use of fields, etc. And yeah, review those and remove any content that could be used for threat planning. And then, yeah, site-specific planning. So working with the right people to work out where the vulnerability points are, and where those like evacuation meeting points are, and just stress testing that, making sure everyone is really aware of where they are. Next slide, please, Lawrence. I'll speed up. I'm conscious running of time. And this, it's important to be aware of this. I'm not including this as a to scare people, but there will be an enforcement, as there is with all legislation. The SIA will have the powers to issue penalty notices for non-compliance. As I say, the SIA won't have 1 million officers running around the UK visiting every qualifying premise. However, if your education setting is reviewed and found to not comply with the legislation, there is a risk of penalties. In the standard tier threshold, those penalties are much less than the enhanced tier. In the enhanced tier, they go up to millions, but in standard tier, you can penalty up to 10,000, and each day then on, for non-compliance, there is a continued penalty. However, at first, the SIA will issue a formal notice. The SIA aren't there to tell you what to do. They will tell you that you haven't met the threshold, and they will highlight areas where that is. The guidance, just to be clear, comes from the Home Office. So it's just clear to make that distinction between them. Next slide, please, Lawrence. This QR code, as I say, I'm really happy for my slides to be shared afterwards, but there is an abundance of free information on ACT eLearning, so Protect UK, and on the Home Office site, Gov UK. Next slide, please, Lawrence. And I'll wrap this up quicker than I had intended. But the key thing is there is a whole range of free resources there for you to use, and know that budgets are tight. What the key point that myself and Figen have made, and across the security industry and the Home Office have made since the legislation has passed, there are a range of rogue operators that will ask you to pay money to join a register, or will do unnecessary security risk assessments, which are over the top and you don't need. However, whilst you should use the free resources to have the training, there is a need for products and services to improve functions like communication, like when an attack happens, how you respond. So what I would say is it's absolutely necessary to engage with businesses, and products like teamSOS, which are inexpensive and help you comply with the legislation. But just be careful of rogue security consultants coming around and saying that they can, make you prepared by implementing certain measures. Martyn's Law is deliberately proportionate. That's the key point that I want to drive here. Schools are under the standard tier threshold. So, as I say, everything that what is required of you and what you think to do has to be proportionate. Make use of those free resources. Make sure that people are aware of what Martyn's Law is. I don't expect everyone to be reading through the full guidance, but the responsible person absolutely should be clear on what that is, and really understanding the different uses of the site as well. So, for instance, if the school site uses the fields for, say, a summer event, and it has a higher capacity of 200, then being familiar with the fact that that still comes under the standard tier duty, even though it might be a school specific event, and the responsible person will have to ensure that the relevant checks and processes are in place. And then also, what I would say is being proactive with networks. So there are education settings that come underneath the 200 capacity. So those aren't, they don't qualify for the requirements under the legislation. However, that doesn't mean they won't be targets. So sharing any good practice that you can with your colleagues and wider education settings, I really encourage that. And that security-minded culture that I talked, Martyn's Law should be viewed as an addition to your current security approach. I know, as I made the point, there are complex processes and robust processes in place. I don't want to be doom and gloom, but I always say never. It's only a matter of when. We don't know when or where the next attack is going to happen, but we want to make sure that if an attack does happen, that you are prepared to respond and mitigate the impact of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan. That was great. I'll pick up from here. I think that it's very clear that, excuse me, that Nathan has set out exactly what the law requires, and really our role as teamSOS is to sort of provide what that actually looks like in real life and not just on paper. Lots of schools have paper policies, but it's actually how that turns into sort of practice, which is key. And that's what we can show you here. That's what I'm about to show you with teamSOS. Some years ago, the DFE put out guidance for everybody to actually put in place evac and lockdown procedures, and actually they're very well documented. Most schools have this. the whole thing here is that it's about action, right? It's about putting into practice things. I think someone in government said that it's how you convert this into real life, and the paper policy isn't good enough, and you have to be able to act out for real. And that's really what teamSOS can help with, and that's what I'm going to show you. So, we say what makes a response work? Well, it's these four things, right? It's speed and making sure that staff, senior members in school know exactly what's going on and can respond quickly. It is indeed coordination and giving clear instructions to everyone to know where to go and what to do and what's actually going on. And that actually is two-way communication as well. The ability to communicate all the time, fundamentally, you'll see that in what I'm about to show you, and having evidence of that and being able to produce evidence of exactly what you did during an incident. That's what teamSOS actually is designed to do. So what I'll do now is that I'm going to take you through and show you what teamSOS is and how it works. So let's just bring that up here and show it to you here. Now this is the version of teamSOS, and there are versions of teamSOS that run on all devices. And what I'm going to do is show you how a lockdown could be affected and how communication is provided within this system to make, how you would use Martyn's Law, basically, how Martyn's Law can be facilitated in your school using this system. And so teamSOS runs as an all-device platform. There's a web version. It runs on Windows, like you can see here. It will use a single sign-on as well. So it's very fast to access. And if you were the head teacher in a school or one of the senior management team and something happened, I'm just going to run through two scenarios. The first one here is an immediate lockdown to show you how quick it is if something happened, and then we'll show you another version of that, of where a staff member sees something and wants to share it, and they're concerned about something like an intruder. But here, let's just say the head teacher has got a call from the police and says something's about to happen, you need to lock down, or for some other reason, you want to do a lockdown, you run up teamSOS, it comes up immediately because it's been deployed to all the computers. It can also be run from mobile phones, Android or iOS, and wherever you are actually, because it works in the cloud. And you can come in here and you can see there's only a couple of buttons on the screen. And this one here, lockdown now, is only available to senior members of staff, not everybody. And I can put it across and it says, are you sure you want to lock down? And I'll say yes. And with that swipe and that click, in about 5 or 6 seconds, we'll actually send a message to every member of staff in the whole school on all of their devices, and it's going to pop up on their screen and grab their attention. And what you can see here that it switched me to is the management console for me for this lockdown incident. You can see here that there is a lockdown now incident live just now, and there's an announcement here. And what will happen in a second is that I'll get a desktop alert. And hopefully you can hear that, but I'll mute it now. But this is a desktop alert. So as a member of staff in the school, my screen has just been taken over, and it made that sound as well. And whatever I was doing, it would take over the whole screen and make that sound to draw your attention. That sound, there can be different sounds, but it literally will turn up the volume on your PC if it's muted. So make sure you can hear it, and it plays it on any audio output, including the interactive whiteboards if it's connected as well as your laptop or your soundbar, whatever's in your PC. And even if you were not logged in to Windows, this would still come up. So if you're not logged in, if you're logged in, if you've got a screensaver on, if the screen's locked, any of those things, this desktop alert is going to come up on every computer in the school. It also come up in a way and make a sound on mobile devices and tablets if you use them. And you can have as many of those things per person as you like, because teamSOS doesn't count them. So one person could have a computer and a phone and an iPad or a tablet, and you can be logged onto all of those things at the same time. And teamSOS doesn't count them from a financial point of view at all. So we've got this desktop alert on my screen. It's grabbed my attention. But what's really important is that it doesn't say very much, because I could be sharing my screen with students at the moment doing a PowerPoint teaching. And so it gives me the chance to breathe and take a breath and disconnect my interactive whiteboard or stop screen sharing before I say view. And now I can actually see the message, the fact that there is an intruder roaming around the site, and I'm looking at it and the students are not. And so I can act upon that, and that message can be very detailed. I mean, long are the days when you have code red and code blue, because now, because the students don't see the message, we can have a lot of detail. And this actually could be our lockdown instructions, the actual things to do to pull the blinds down and lock the doors, or whatever it happens to be, for your particular school and your policy. And so even if people or staff didn't actually know, they were new to the school, maybe they're students, they didn't know the policies, and so you're giving it to them on the screen, and so they go through it. And so if I was that member of staff, I'll lock the doors or pull the blinds down and do those things. And I come back here and I might never have seen this before, but I can see what I've got to do. I can just say whether I'm okay or not. And actually, let's just go and give it an example that we don't want to and never want anyone to have, right? But let's just say that there is someone actually trying to get into my classroom, and I've locked the door, but there's someone trying to get into the classroom. So I'm actually going to say I'm not okay. But even with or without, and with no training, it's very easy to do. You don't have to have a manual for this. So I'm going to click I'm not okay, and I'm going to say the man is in our building now. Bit of typing there, but I'll quickly fix it. The man is in our building now. He is trying to open the door, but we are safe. And I can send it back. No one needs a manual to drive this. It's as simple as it can be. So anyone, even if they've never seen it before, can push these couple of buttons and they've given feedback. And you can see what actually happens here is that here is my lockdown incident. You wouldn't have many incidents here. I've already just had a busy day, so there you are, right? But there's my lockdown incident at the top, and you can see here that there's my announcement. And this is the actual timeline space for this announcement. And what's interesting about it, there's a few things, is that I can type here and have a conversation with my senior members of staff. So it's just the senior members of staff who are in this conversation. But that lockdown now shortcut that we did made an announcement to the whole school, and it was done in the fastest way possible. And so you can see here that announcement went to all of these people. 4 people have not responded. 14 people said they were okay. 7 said they were not okay. And I can drill down here and look at the people who are not okay. And you can see I get my list of people who are not okay. You get the at the top here, there was my response that I did. And if these were all real people, they're actually robots for my demonstration. As you probably figured out, my school responders happen to be the cast of Harry Potter. So they're not real people, they're bots. And if they were real people and real members of staff, underneath each of their name would be a reason why they're not okay. So if Ron, a teacher in my school, we were locking down, and Ron, the teacher, said, actually, I'm not okay because one of my students went to the toilet before we did the lockdown. What do? Do I go and get them? I could click on Ron and actually type a message to him and say, if it's safe, there's someone else in your classroom, you should go and see if you can find the student. And if it's quiet. And I'm not just responding, it's all of the senior management team is actually responding. You can see this and can participate. And that's the same with all of these, right? All of these people who are not okay, I can look at their specific issues and help them. And it's not the same as having, it's much better than having, 10 emails and 5 WhatsApp messages and 10 text messages of people coming back to you. teamSOS is structuring and controlling the response of people so that you can actually manage and deal with it. And of course, from that information and from those people who are not okay, I could then send out another announcement to the staff to say something's changed. But you'll see that in a minute, and I'll go on to that. Just so you know, the ways of responding to this message is you can type, and give an update to your senior management team, or you can pick fast messages here, like standard messages that the school set up. Or the third way is this orange button, which is interesting and very unique, which is a walkie-talkie, right? And a walkie-talkie function that you push, you speak, and it works just like a walkie-talkie. The difference is it only goes to these people, which is interesting. So it's not like a normal walkie-talkie, which goes to everybody. In that sense, it goes to just the specific people you want it to go to can hear you, and they can respond. And it's recorded in the feed, so is evidenced about what you said, which is unlike a normal walkie-talkie. So that's kind of what I wanted to show, is a really fast way of making a lockdown. You can see in a swipe and a click and 5 seconds, you can lock down the whole school, communicate with everybody, even if they're, everyone's Windows PCs, even if they're not in school right now, right? Even if they're outside coming in, they'd know something's going on because they'd get it to their mobile device if they had teamSOS on there. The other version of this, the other scenario we might go through, is that lockdowns don't always happen immediately like that. They might build up. And so you have the other capability here in teamSOS that if someone, a member of staff, looked out the window, saw an intruder jumping over the fence, they don't know who they are, they're wearing a hoodie, they're carrying a bag, and they're concerned about it. So they can come to teamSOS and click call for help. Everyone can call for help, and just by clicking on it, you get the box where you can type whatever it is that you're concerned about. I'll just paste in a quick message here. I've seen a man jumping over the fence, he's carrying a bag, and I start an incident. By starting an incident, ignore that one, by starting an incident, what I'm effectively doing, right, is telling the senior management team, it's actually a bigger team here, but that's the senior management team in this particular school. You see, I've done a call for help. The senior management team, they have been informed, right, that I've seen a man carrying a bag jumping over the fence, and they all know that. And the reason they know that is they'll get a notification to their devices, the teamSOS devices, and that notification will have a special sound, different to the blip of Teams or the ping of an email. It sounds like the Morse code for SOS, that that sound, and it's quite distinctive. And you can see someone's received it, tapped on the notification, and they've joined the message, the call here. And as they do that, as more people do that, their pictures get highlighted. And I could type to them, the man is at the back door of the gym now. Sorry, there's other stuff going on here in my demo. But the man is at the back door of the gym now, and I send that. And so you can see I can type that. I could also maybe take a photo of him from my phone. I'll pick one here I did before and pick that photo and put that man. And so everyone can see the picture of the man and everyone can see the history. And as more people join, they can see exactly what's going on. And so from here, it might be that the head teacher, who is actually not in the school at the moment, is out doing something else, coming back from a meeting. They can see that this is going on. They can see that all these people on their phone or whatever device, or even the deputy head are homesick with their laptop open, whatever it happens to be, they can still see what's going on with the teamSOS app, single signed on using Office 365. They can see this going on, don't like what's going on, decide to lock down the school. And all they have to do, and only certain people can do this, push plus, make an announcement, and you get the announcement screen. Now, the announcement screen is the thing you saw before, the announcement to send a message to the whole school, every member of staff. And you can see it here, all staff. There's various settings on here, which I don't have to remember because we have templates here. And these templates set everything for you. So in the moment, when you're under pressure, you don't have to think of these things. So if it was a fire evacuation, I can click on that and it fills in everything for me. You can see there's some messaging here that it's done to send to everybody. That's the title. And it's actually going to send a desktop alert, that thing that took over the screen. You saw that. And it's going to be urgent. So it did all of that for me. There's another one here. intruder in the building. If I click on that one, it does different things and sends a different message. I'm going to use this intruder lockdown outside that you've seen before. And when I click on this one, it fills everything in for me. And it even pushes the send button for me. So it makes it really, really easy for me to do. And I'll just mention a couple of things on this screen. I will push the send button in a minute. So you can see it's going to go to all staff. That's automatic. It always has a list of all staff. This title, the message I have this title and this content, and it's going to send it a desktop alert to all of the all computers in the school. But you can limit it in various ways to different areas and departments if you want to on those desktop alerts. And you can also make it silent if you want to. But if you just wanted speed, you click on intruder lockdown outside and you push send and it goes. And what you can see here is this, in this announcement is some numbers. So it's appeared in the feed and 24 people haven't responded. But as we look at it, the numbers change. That's as it's being delivered to all of your staff, letting them know what's going on. And I will just acknowledge this quickly because you've seen all this stuff already, because the desktop alerts come up, taken over my screen as well. And I'll just view it and say I'm okay this time. Sorry for the coughing. So this is the announcement. And what you can see here is that it updated on its own. 4 people have not responded. And as people respond, these numbers update automatically in real time. So some people have said they're okay. And the bit you saw before, some other people have said they're not okay. And in looking at this, as we said, anyone could give me an update which might be helpful. So if someone said to me, the man's in building number 1, I might send another announcement that I'm from here. I won't do, but you've seen that bit. I could send another announcement to say the man's in building number 1. Everyone in building number 1 continue to lock down. Everyone in building number 2 and 3 evacuate away from building number 1. And you can't do that ringing a bell 5 different ways. And hopefully you can see there the merits of teamSOS. So whether it's a lockdown, an evacuation or an evacuation, teamSOS gives you this capability to communicate with everybody on whatever device they're on and have a record of it. Everything that happened here was recorded. That, and including your drills and everything else, is recorded on our web server, which you've got access to forever in the future. So that's kind of, sorry, little cough there. That's kind of a quick summary of what teamSOS does and how it's used. And so I think what I'll do now is I'll hand back to Jonathan. And Jonathan, if you're there, we're right on the 45-minute mark. If you wanted to cover off and see if we've got any questions.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you very much to both of you. There have been a few questions that are in the community, so I will go through. I mean, I did ask the question, what is the biggest concern about preparing for Martyn's Law? And Paul put one of them is the physical restriction of an open plan building. How would you overcome that? What would be your advice on that?
Do you want me to say that, or you don't?
You can start. I might add to it. Go on.
I think Lawrence will probably come on. Lawrence will talk about that and what teamSOS can do for that. But you know, open plan buildings have been considered within the legislation, and I think, as I say, it's having those procedures. So thinking, really identifying all those vulnerable points, all those, you know, entrance, exit, you know, wider access points, having a real detailed understanding of the site itself as well, and then mitigating those in as far as much as you can do.
It's a good
Sure. The thing I would also say is that a few things. teamSOS has layers of communication here. We also support, I didn't talk about it, but we now, the latest version supports tannoys, which means actually we can present messages on a tannoy to announce things in a big way, right? But actually, the reverse of that is the fact that you don't have to use that, and you can communicate with silent messaging, the complete reverse, right? And so because the devices, even in an open plan area, because the devices are people's machines, Windows PCs, or their mobiles, or their tablets, or any of those, and the fact that you can communicate silently is allowing you to get directly to the people's hands, the people themselves. Even in an open plan place, you can communicate with everyone without saying a word, right? And that's quite interesting, because, as I say, you've got one end of the spectrum, which is you want to announce something, and some people like that sort of thing. But then, football, where there are people on the field, but then maybe after that, and that's an optional extra. But after that, you might want to do silent communications, and having the ability to do both is the key. So you can be very flexible in that sense.
Another good point. And Megan said she has the same sort of problem. She's got an open plan school, but she just, what a common within the community is, where do you start? What is the first thing you must get done, and what you should get done right? I think that's more for next year.
Yeah.
The first thing to do, as I say, this standard tier, so it's proportionate. So it's not an overly complex process. However, it is different. A school with a capacity of 200 is going to be different to a school with a capacity of, say, 700, and it's open site. So the current suggestion is conducting those risk assessments now. So looking at, I think I said in the presentation, where you identify, say, like an exit point, or say a lock system, as basic as that. Is a fire exit fit for purpose? Will that provide provision? Looking at, externally. So so now you're required to think about the threat, the actor, what they're looking at. So is it a process that you have where you could use a deterrent? So letting them know there's CCTV on site or security on site. Just thinking through those simple steps that you can take and complete without them being too arduous, hopefully in most places, and time consuming places. So it's really getting to grips. And as I say, with governing bodies and trusts, the assumption is with the level of security in place already and the procedures, you should have an awareness of what the site is and what's in place. So it's going through that in some detail and making sure someone has a plan to correct or strengthen different areas.
And can I also add that, in terms of school policy and the policies and things like lockdown policies, people think, oh, I've got a lockdown policy, but actually lockdown, you thinking it through the lens of this, Martyn's Law. If you had an intruder, there might be advice that there's an intruder outside your boundary, or there might be advice that there's an intruder inside your boundary, or there might be advice that there's an intruder inside your building. And I think actually your lockdown instructions might be different. If you knew that there was an intruder outside of your boundary, sure, you might send the caretaker to lock the gate, right? And things like that. But that wouldn't be the case if there was an intruder inside your boundary, as a simple example, And so thinking about the different situations that might happen with the Martyn's Law lens to your policy makes quite a few versions of it. I would suggest that.
Yeah. And sorry, just to add the awareness piece as well. So making sure, it's not just one individual on site that is aware of what Martyn's Law is. So just, I don't know, in different forums, speaking with staff, making sure they're aware. And as I say, it can be something as simple as, getting them to do the ACT e-learning training.
I mean, really good point. And the awareness piece is a crucial thing, is actually understanding why we're doing this. And that gives the sort of like whole focus for the school of why this is important for this school. So, and all those things, You said you were going to share the slides. Is there still a possibility of sharing the slides, and I can share them in the community later on? The other part, the big focus is small schools, and actually the difference between evacuation and lockdown, and what would you do in all in the same space. What sort of advice would you give to small schools?
Again, so I'll start in terms of the legislation. Lawrence, you can talk about your piece. Proportionate is the words that I drilled home there. So there's not any hard and fast rule what works in one setting to another. So it's, as I say, by conducting those assessments and reviews of your setting, you really identify. It might not be appropriate that you have an evacuation if your school's so small, and say the main hall that you've got has lots of glass and visibility. So it might be that evacuation and escaping is the approach, but there's no template to go, right, this works in my setting, so you should do this. It's being really clear on what you are with your students in individual needs and collective needs, thinking of that through a security lens.
Yeah,
I would say as well that teamSOS has been deployed in even very, very small schools, some 100 students, etc., just because communicating in these things is the key, and evidencing what you did is also the key. It doesn't matter about how many students when you want to evidence exactly what you did and when you did it, and that's what the system actually allows you to provide. So, you know, people are finding it, even though you think you could probably shout, right? Sometimes, you know, in a small school, you know, someone might be outside, right? Someone might not be in the building, even though it's a small school, you know, so the communications element is really key. And as I agree completely with Nathan, you know, there's obviously nuance in every single school and every single building and how it applies to you. And so, but at least if you've got a dedicated way of communicating with everyone, you can make the right choices in that particular moment.
I think Jonathan's dropped off. I'll just add on to that, the communication point, you referring back to the Manchester Arena. So, you know, and that really highlights the importance of communication. So a security guard was told several times that there was a individual that was acting suspicious, that looked suspicious, and due to a lack of training, that security guard didn't want to approach the individual for fear of being called racist. And then when the attack actually happened, poor security guard who had received inadequate training didn't know what the red button on his physical walkie-talkie meant, which, as I say, there were a whole variety of failings identified through the Manchester Arena inquiry. But as on Lawrence's point on communication was the overriding for me across all of the areas, from pre to post attack was failed essentially.
So we lost you there, John.
But just one more question from Gary, who's saying, do you know if the records need to be stored and accessible for Ofsted in the long term?
Always keep a record, yeah. I mean, that's my advice. Yeah.
Very good.
And certainly records of drills. Sorry, Jonathan. Records of drills is probably a good thing to do. Lockdown drills. I mean, I don't know if you know, because everyone might keep a record of their fire bell drills, but you know, records of lockdown drills and/or anything else related is always good to be recorded.
I mean, there's one question I would like to ask though: is what is the common misconception with everything about Martyn's Law? What should schools not be worried about in the sense of Martyn's Law and putting it in place?
So as I say, I alluded to it. Since enactment, there's been a range of businesses that have sought a quick profit and have really driven home the enforcement piece, and trying to get business through scaring businesses, schools, sorry, and education settings. While I think there's absolutely a need for some businesses to provide services and products for schools, what I think is that proportionality piece, as I say, understanding that this is a standard tier requirement and not having to spend excessive monies to be on a register of businesses that doesn't provide value to that education setting, and spending excessive amounts of money on someone that will come and do a risk assessment, which you've probably already got under, say, the health and safety or safeguarding requirements there. That's for the Martyn's Law piece. What I'd say is, like, what tends to be the big misconception is overselling and saying, you know, while we will say, like, yeah, think beyond standard tier, it's good to think about extra steps that you can. It's being proportionate. So if you realize that there's a gap of communications, that's where something like teamSOS is brilliant for doing that, as Lawrence's demonstration. But where you might have someone that say, I can make all this better for you, that might be unnecessary spend. That's my biggest concern across the board, education settings and beyond, is that people feel that they have to spend money unnecessarily on services that just don't improve them.
Have you got anything to add to that, Lawrence?
No, I mean, I think Nathan said it really well. I just, you know, it's we really built teamSOS to be for everybody, and so it's very inexpensive, and so we, you know, it's very much designed for just to be able for small schools, really small schools, to be able to tick that box and have the capabilities in place to record their drills and do that kind of thing with for Martyn's Law. But very much, you know, again, is priced accordingly for every type of school. And so, you know, I think, as I say, I do think that there are people out there, as Nathan said, really trying to scare people, and you know, that's not us.
Well, thank you very much for your time today. It's been really useful, of all the information you shared about Martyn's Law and what schools can do. So thank you, Lawrence. Thank you, Nathan. There are lots more information within the community about it. There's a couple of blogs on there. If you want to find out more information about it, go to the School Leader community. I'm sure Nathan will share his slide later on within that. And yeah, if you have any questions, pop them in there and we'll get them to Nathan and Lawrence to answer your questions. So thank you very much for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Cheers, bye.